Hi everybody, it's Maria at Read, Create, Repeat Homeschool, and today I wanted to talk to you about the Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. Just a little bit more in depth. I've mentioned it before. And then I also wanted to give you a couple of great nonfiction reads as a follow-up if you enjoy it. So here's the cover. I have to take it back to the library tomorrow, so enjoy it. Colson did a great job of telling Cora's story as she goes through. She is a slave who is escaping up north. And in his depiction, the Underground Railroad is a real railroad. There's actually underground tunnels. And one of the quotes that I really appreciated was, if you want to see what this nation is all about, I always say, you have to ride the rails. Look outside as you speed through and you'll find the true face of America. He does an amazing job, not only of weaving in other people's stories that connect to Cora. There's the slave catcher, there's another slave that's trying to get away, there's somebody who helps her who's kind of reluctant, and I like that he does that. How he also does a good job of each state that she stops in at each station, and she stays there for a little while. You see how different states reacted to the end of slavery and whether they were indulgent of slaves and kind of let them live alongside them, but still treating them poorly, whether they got rid of the slaves by lynchings, which there are some in there. If you are a sensitive reader, be aware of that. There's some, I had to stop reading this book 3 times because it just got a little bit too much for my heart. But you see just kind of how each state really did take a different approach. And I think that was really helpful. Obviously in our day and age, we don't talk about state differences as much. I mean, we know that they're there, but we don't see necessarily as many legal differences overall. Yeah, so I appreciated that. Another quote, another thing that it made me think of was, as a white person, it is easy for me to say I empathize with the struggle that Black people have gone through. And it's easy for me to say racism sucks and I need to fight against it. However, I can never ever see it through a Black person's eyes, which it's just how it is. They can't see through my eyes, I can't see through theirs. But I like with literature how you are able to kind of step in their shoes a little bit. And there were a few moments in this book that made me kind of think of that. There was one where she was getting away and she got a hug from the person who had helped her escape, who was a white gentleman. And she just kind of tensed up and kept thinking, is this hug the price of my freedom? Is he going to violate me? Why does he feel he has the right to hug me and touch me? And it made me think, how many times as a person who's trying to help someone, do we make assumptions about what is appropriate and what it's not? And I think those are things we don't necessarily think about, and I liked that that was addressed. In one of the states that she stops in, she has to put on the clothing, costume, regalia of a slave from the past, and she has to pretend to be a slave who lived, 100 years prior, in this museum kind of setup. And it made me think not only about African Americans who might have to role play as slaves for various historical places, but Native Americans who have, whether they've decided to be in that role. I think most of the time it's pretty decent now. But what kind of feelings do people have when they are put in the role of pretending to be their ancestor who is not treated kindly? And it was just so many interesting questions about how we portray history, how we learn about things, how children can see things, and how we can kind of whitewash things to say that they weren't as bad as they were. She says, no slave ever died from spindling at a spinning wheel. And it does it. We don't see as many hard things that people went through because it's not okay to treat people like that. So we don't see those depictions for good reason. But I think sometimes we lose the graphic nature of what really went on. And I don't want our children to not know those things going into the future because I don't want them to be repeated. So that's why I think so many slave narratives, and the more we talk about these things, the more we actually look at historical documents and not just rely on kid textbooks that have nice people in them, I think we'll be better off for it. So that's kind of some of the main things that I wanted to share. I did also want to share another quote. She said, somewhere years ago, she had stopped off the path of life and could no longer find her way back to the family of people. And I think the more I read about stories of slaves or refugees or those kinds of things, it does more than just take away their freedom. It takes away their humanity for a long time, and I don't know how easy it is for people to get it back. And yeah, so I think there were some really good questions. The book made me cry. The book made me just take a long pause several times. So I would recommend picking it up. Also, if you are interested in some of the other books that might do a good job of this, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. This one's nonfiction. I'm about halfway through it. I've been slowly getting through it. I need to finish it. But it talks about just the repercussions of Jim Crow and what that's done for people, how many people have ended up in jail because of some of these laws, and what we need to do to take a hard look at ourselves and our country. And also, this one, if you've seen the movie, it's also actually a book, 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northup. And this man's story, he was a free man, and then he was captured and became a slave. And so it was, I haven't gotten all the way through this one either, but it's an interesting idea to see somebody who used to be free and then has to have that taken. So anytime you see a slave narrative, I mean, there aren't obviously as many narratives because people didn't have the ability to read and write as much. They weren't taught for a good reason. They wanted to keep them subjugated. And so I would definitely recommend picking up some of these books. Just Mercy, I've talked about before. It's also another good one. So I'd really want to challenge you to read more about race in your country or wherever you're from both sides of the coin. There's some more on my to be read list that I'm hoping to get to. So I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.